and best practices for fostering multi-stakeholder collaboration in support of women and girls in crisis settings. Here are a few statistics to provide context on the vulnerability of women and girls during conflict, which outlines the opportunities to respond and to provide support as well. According to UNHCR, we know that generally women and girls make up more than 50% of any internally displaced, refugee, or stateless population. In 2024, more than 614 million women and girls lived in conflict-affected countries. That number has more than doubled since 2017. Women in conflict areas are 7.7 times more likely to live in extreme poverty than women in conflict-free areas. And forcibly displaced women are often first responders in conflict settings, but remain significantly underrepresented in peace building and formal peace processes. We are advocating for survivor-centered integrated social protection systems. This means operating a multi-sectoral coordinated system that provides economic assistance, mental health support, childcare, legal services, food, and housing security to women and girls. Shortly, we will hear about tailored interventions, community-based strategies, and policy frameworks implemented in partnership in Ukraine and Uganda. These are two places that are at different ends of the humanitarian response spectrum, one under active hostilities and another in the recovery and reparation phase. Today, we have gathered an array of partners to share their perspectives on how best to actively engage and strengthen women and girls' resilience. But first, I'd like to give you a quick overview of what you're in store for today. First, we will hear brief presentations from all 5 speakers without interruption. In the second half of the session, we will move to a moderated panel discussion. We ask that you please hold on to your questions until later in the presentation. However, we do encourage that you write your questions in the chat as they come up. We are eager to have a lively dialogue and will allot time for about 2 rounds of questions from the audience. Rest assured that our team will keep track of these questions throughout the presentation. So now we will move to our presentations. We will first hear from our Ugandan colleagues. According to UNHCR, women and children make up approximately 81% of refugees in Uganda. Further, just a few weeks ago, the International Criminal Court granted reparations totaling a record 52.4 million euro, or $56 million to thousands of victims of a convicted Lord's Resistance Army commander. Reparations will go to an estimated 50,000 victims injured by his crimes. Our speakers today will be sharing their reflections. Our first speaker will be Samuel Mukirane, who is the Associate Programs Director for HealthRight's Uganda Country Office. Samuel has nearly 18 years working experience in the development and humanitarian sector, managing multi-million-dollar projects from donors such as Danita, BPRM, NORAD, and ECHO, to name a few. Samuel is a certified project management professional with a master's degree in public health and a bachelor's in social sciences from Mukirane University. Scott J. Bartell is an attorney and program manager at the Trust Fund for Victims at the International Criminal Court. Mr. Bartell joined the Trust Fund in 2007, where he oversees victim reparation and assistance programming in cases and situations under the jurisdiction of the ICC. Mr. Bartell is based in the Kampala, Uganda Regional Office and has directed programmatic initiatives throughout the region and beyond. Please welcome Samuel, followed by Scott. Samuel, over to you. And please remember to unmute yourself.
Thank you very much for that very wonderful introduction. And I will just go straight to my presentation. Basically, Uganda, as you can see, that is where Uganda is located, and those are our neighbors. And that is the footprint of our program. Just to say that Uganda has had two major humanitarian incidents. One was in 1986 when we had the LRA war that took more than close to 20 years. And then later on, Uganda, as you all know, has been receiving huge numbers of refugees. And it's actually the first refugee hosting country in Africa and the fourth in the world. And of course, these two incidents have really made women and girls very vulnerable, as you will be seeing in the next slides. Next. Yeah, so as I said, the LRA war affected more than 1 million people, mainly in the greater northern region of Uganda, and 37% of these were women and girls. And of course, the violence that came from this war was driven by gender and power inequalities, which negatively impacted the situation of women and girls. And of course, there was a lot of law disobedience and broken social norms among the perpetrators. And of course, also, there were a number of structural inequalities that people in this region, especially women and girls, experienced. And thanks to the Trust Fund for Victims project that HealthRight has been implementing in Uganda for the past 5 years, which aims to provide physical and psychological rehabilitation to all victims who survived the armed conflict. And of course, this armed conflict basically had a lot of war crimes and crimes against humanity. Is in line. This project is in line with the TFV's main objective that intends to advocate and assist the most vulnerable victims of the crimes within the International Criminal Court's jurisdiction. And of course, HealthRight has been able to reach over 11,000 victims. And of course, 37% of these women and girls who are SGBV survivors. Next. As part of our response under the Trust Fund for Victims, we have documented a lot of physical and emotional experiences that women and girls have gone through, and some of these actually range from reproductive health-related complications, sexually transmitted infections, pelvic inflammatory diseases, complications as a result of rape, because as basically, as some of you might have heard, there were lots of inhuman atrocities that people in this part of the country of Uganda experienced, and the women were the most affected. And of course, also, there has been a lot of early marriages and teenage pregnancies, which, of course, we have documented as we implement this program. And a lot of girls in the post-war situation of northern Uganda have dropped out of school, and this has further exacerbated their vulnerability. Next. Now, these are some of the things that we have been able to do, the direct interventions that we have put across to try and minimize these effects on women and girls. And of course, our resolve has been to restructure SGBV case management, which has included provision of information, provision of technical, social, and psychological case identification, management, and referral, and then linkages and provision of post-recovery socio-economic enterprise using our integrated intervention approach. 22% of the resources that we have received under this grant have been earmarked and dedicated to support SGBV survivors. And of course, majority of these have been women and girls. And the LRAO, as I said earlier, basically affected these people severely. And so they have been affected physically and emotionally. And we have been able to support these people that we have identified with psychological support through our community-based providers. And this has helped them to understand their experiences, of course, overcome guilt, express anger, normalize the violent incident, here basically helping these women and girls to understand that they are not responsible for the violence and that they are not the only one. And of course, also, we have supported initiatives that help to rebuild their morale, to access support networks and services. And we have also provided specialized medical and surgical interventions to support women and girls, especially those with gynecological and other medical complications. Next. We have also purpose to build capacity of our community-based providers to assess survivors for psychological determinants of any social or health problem, identify the needs related, and link them to appropriate services within our multidisciplinary team. We have quite a wide range of teams from the community, others working with the health facilities. And so we ensure that once we understand the kind of challenge that these survivors are going through, then we refer them accordingly. We have also ensured that we liaise with partners and link survivors to other needed care, including linking them to even non-project specialized services and partners like protection, because we work with the government, we work with police and other providers for legal and education services. We have also worked with our community-based structures to conduct home visits, to follow up on survivors and assess family or community factors that could be hindering recovery. We have conducted community and family dialogues because we believe that family is a great source of support to some of these survivors, especially women and girls. We have also recruited SGBV survivors to village savings and loans associations and livelihood support. And here we have earmarked some seed capital, which has helped them in the economic empowerment, and also which has helped in in handling some of the conflicts that do happen within their families. We ensure that these VSLA groups are sure that these VSLAs are referred and programs, especially microfinance related programs that can actually provide more support to them. Then we impart social coping skills to survivors, especially women and girls. And to say these interventions have really enabled these women and girls to get economically empowered, to deal with their health related problems, as you will be seeing in some of the pictures, where some of them have gone through surgeries, especially those that had very severe physical injuries during the war, but also the economic empowerment within their families. Most of them have been able to take their children to school. They have been able to actually put food on the table. They have benefited from the social cohesion that has been created within the formations of the groups and the VSLAs, but also they have been able to be respected and also speak and participate in the development of their areas. Next, Nelly. Yeah, so these are some of the pictures that illustrate our work in terms of like this one here. We were conducting a community sensitization and awareness meeting, as we said, one of our core activities to ensure that we provide information to our beneficiaries, but also empower them to participate in our programs so that we can hear from them. Next. Yes, here we were also deliberating with them, but also were going through some prioritization activities where they were able to tell us what kind of interventions should we prioritize over others and why. So we make sure that every decision we make, our beneficiaries are empowered, and as you can see, the majority of them are women. Next. Here we see a group of women also interacting in a VSLA group, and they were basically discussing, they were saving, and those that wanted to get some credit from this VSLA were also being discussed and assessed how much money they can handle. So we have ensured that women are actually economically empowered and can make decisions that can actually support themselves and their families. And then, of course, the last one is basically, these are the surgical, we have been conducting surgical camps across the greater northern region that was affected by this war. And this is a picture that is illustrating one of our survivors undergoing surgery. Yeah, next. Thank you very much for listening to me. And in the interest of time, I really didn't want to give you a lot of information, but we can have discussion where more insights can be shared. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Sam. Hi, my name is Scott Bartell. I'm the program manager at the Trust Fund for Victims, as Teresa mentioned. Good morning or good afternoon, and greetings from Kampala. It's a pleasure to speak with you today concerning the Trust Fund for Victims and our assistance programming here in Uganda. Next slide, please. Let's take a moment to appreciate the magnitude and depth of the Trust Fund assistance in the life of the victims and in relation to court activities. The reach and scope of Trust Fund assistance is an extraordinary good news story for the ICC. As you see, the Trust Fund has two principal mandates. We operate in parallel to the court. You have the prosecutor, and you have the judges, and you have the Trust Fund for Victims. The Office of the Prosecutor and the courts are there to adjudicate and go after the criminal perpetrators of the crimes, and the Trust Fund is there to provide reparations to victims at the end of a trial and to provide assistance to victims in this situation. And that is what we are doing here in Uganda. We've been implementing an assistance program since 2008. So as a specific example, in the Ugandan assistance program, between 2008 and 2023, more than 73,000 Ugandans have received rehabilitation. That is medical treatment and surgery, trauma counseling and psychosocial support, and then it may also include material support and livelihood initiatives. These are life-changing services that afford a degree of justice to victims of the crimes, and a majority of whom in our programming are women. 65 to 70% of the beneficiaries in our projects are females. It is an unfortunate pattern that we have observed in conflicts going back for a century now. The trust fund deals with the injuries and consequences of conflict crimes, war crimes, crimes against humanity, aggression, and genocide. The consequences of conflict on people, the civilians, women and children and men. And over time, the nature of the conflict has shifted greatly against civilians. The trend in conflict deaths, for example, between military and civilian deaths have shifted greatly. In World War I, the ratio was 10 military to 1 civilian. In World War II, it shifted to about 50-50, half civilian, half military. In Vietnam, it shifted again, 30 to 70, 30 military to 70 civilian. And in recent decades, in recent wars, there's been a further deterioration in the situation to 20 to 80, 20 military to 80 civilian, or some studies indicate 15 military to 85 civilian. Of the civilian deaths in recent decades, 1/3 are children. The ratio also pertains to morbidity, injuries, and harm to civilians in conflict. This impact is all too evident in our programming, where the great majority of those treated and rehabilitated are female victims of the conflict. Next slide, please. Victim rehabilitation and assistance are life-changing events and services provided to victims. These are not minor injuries that we are addressing. These are injuries endured during conflict, inflicted on civilians during war. These injuries are debilitating and life-altering. In Uganda, the Trust Fund began implementing an assistance program in 2008 across the conflict-affected region of northern Uganda. To date, between 2008 and 2023, more than 73,000 victims have been rehabilitated from injuries sustained in the conflict between the government of Uganda and the Lord's Resistance Army through Trust Fund assistance initiatives. Next slide, please. Initiatives such as medical rehabilitation and medical treatment, plastic surgery for facial disfigurement, and burn injuries, removing bullets and bomb fragments, providing artificial limbs for amputees, physiotherapy and postoperative care, chronic pain management, and specialized SCBV services such as fistula repair and more. Excuse me. Next slide, please. Trauma counseling, provision of clinical counseling services for individuals, families, and groups. Trauma counseling to respond to mental health disorders such as PTSD, depression, and anxiety disorders that victims have obtained during the conflict. As one woman put it, counseling helped me to settle my heart and my mind from the harm I endured and the atrocities I witnessed in the war. In addition to counseling services, the Trust Fund supports psychosocial programming to promote community reconciliation initiatives, peer support group activities like music, dance, drama, and sports activities to promote healing and social cohesion. Psychosocial activities also include peace building, community sensitization programs, workshops, radio broadcasts concerning topics such as acceptance, mitigating stigma against survivors, former child soldiers, persons with disabilities, and so forth, and promoting reintegration within communities. Next slide, please. Livelihood support to victims that have lost everything during the conflict because of attacks on their homes, their villages, either through experiencing multiple displacements and disruption to their lives, destruction of their home and their property, experiencing abduction, loss of education opportunities, loss of livelihoods and businesses. We support victims through Village Savings and Loan Associations, which is a microcredit scheme at the community level, income generating activities, vocational training, animal husbandry, improved agriculture programs, a variety of livelihood initiatives aimed to revitalize local economies and rehabilitate household livelihoods. Many victims have stated that rehabilitation for their injury and help from the trust fund is a form of justice for them and their family because of our association with the ICC, with the court. The trust fund programming is conducted in partnership with NGOs such as HealthRight International and other NGOs in country. Tapping into local knowledge and service providers is crucial as we work with Ugandan NGOs, international NGOs, faith-based organizations, cultural institutions, and academic institutions in country. Trust fund assistance is not humanitarian support. It is about vindicating victims' rights to remedy and rendering valuable rehabilitation assistance to victims before the ICC within the jurisdiction of the Rome Statute. Next slide, please. The Trust Fund realizes that there are still victims of the conflict that continue to endure harm from conflict crimes, and the Trust Fund reaffirms its support to victims, assistance, and rehabilitation projects in Uganda, and we look forward to developing a responsive reparations program in the Dominic Ongwen case for the victims in that case. The resilience of victims and their ability to overcome unimaginable harm should be the foundation for a just and peaceful society built on shared trust and confidence in the future. Thank you for your attention and for your support, and I look forward to the discussion and your questions later. Teresa, thank you.
Thank you so much, Scott, and thank you, Samuel, for sharing the various ways that we can support women and girls and provide access to justice. Now we will hear from our Ukrainian colleagues. Ukraine recently marked the second anniversary of the full-scale Russian invasion. Active efforts to respond to the ongoing humanitarian crisis continues in spite of the reduced funding and resources. In 2024, OCHA has documented 14.6 million people in need of humanitarian support, which is nearly half of Ukraine's current population. Of those internally displaced, 68% are women. Many of these women lost homes, jobs, and access to basic social services and protection. Today, our speakers are Halina Skipalska, who is the country director in Ukraine for HealthRight International and the executive director of the Ukrainian Foundation for Public Health. With over 20 years of experience, she remains a dedicated human rights activist and well-recognized gender expert in Ukraine. Halina is actively engaged in national reform initiatives, providing specialized services for survivors of domestic violence and gender-based violence. Halina is a PhD fellow at the Boris Grynchenko Kyiv University. She has held numerous fellowships with UNESCO and both the Austrian and Swedish governments. We also welcome Halina Zhukovska, who is a senior researcher at the Office of the Government Commissioner for Gender Policy in Ukraine. With a PhD in public administration, she has 16 years of experience in public administration, holding positions from chief specialist to department director. Since 2018, she has been working in the Office of the Government Commissioner for Gender Policy of the Secretariat of the Cabinet Ministers of Ukraine. Her responsibilities include analyzing the effectiveness of the implementation of state gender policy in all spheres of society, monitoring draft legislation for compliance with the principle of gender equality, developing legislation, and formulating management decisions based on the principle of ensuring equal rights and opportunities in all spheres of society. She is an expert of international organizations working in the field of human rights, including UN Women, USAID, and the OSCE. Lastly, we'll hear from Katerina Cherepaka, who is the president of La Strada Ukraine, an NGO established in 1997 to combat trafficking in persons, gender-based violence, and domestic violence, ensuring gender equality, and protecting the rights of children. La Strada Ukraine is a member of the International La Strada Association, a European network of Helpline International, ECPAT, and the Global Alliance Against Traffic in Women, organizations prevention of human trafficking, as well as Women Against Violence Europe Network, Child Helpline International, ECPAT, and the Global Alliance. Ms. Charapaka began at La Strada Ukraine as a human trafficking prevention hotline consultant in 1998. She assisted in the expansion of the hotline from a weekly service to an around-the-clock toll-free resource that supports victims of human trafficking, gender-based violence, and domestic violence daily. Since the start of Russia's war against Ukraine, the telephone and online hotline has seen a multifold increase in calls for assistance. It has remained open under her leadership, and as a result, thousands of Ukrainians have been able to access crucial information, advice, and assistance to keep themselves safe from trafficking and exploitation. So now I will turn the stage over to Halina Skipaska.
Thank you, Teresa. Dear ladies and gentlemen, I'm very delighted to have the opportunity to speak at this event today. Today, I would like to share with you our insights and best practices for supporting women and girls during the ongoing military offensive and humanitarian crisis in Ukraine. But first of all, I want to appreciate global solidarity from the international community, governments, international and humanitarian organizations, ordinary people who make every effort to support our country. It helps us continue our fight for a future for Ukraine, where safety, dignity, and other fundamental rights of women and girls are ensured. Next slide, please. In February 2022, my life and the lives of millions of Ukrainians dramatically changed overnight. Russia's full-scale invasion has taken tens of thousands of lives, caused untold devastation of the economy and infrastructure, torn families and communities, and traumatized generations of Ukrainians. According to humanitarian organizations, over 10 million forced to leave their homes. 56% of them are women and children. Homes, schools, and hospitals continue to be bombed every day, disrupting critical services. Estimated 8 million women and girls will need humanitarian assistance in 2024. 72% of people registered as unemployed are women. Next, please. Despite all the challenges, our team, which includes specialists living in the frontline regions and the staff relocated from the areas now temporarily occupied by Russian troops, remains dedicated to supporting the essential needs of war-affected families, women and girls. When the war broke out, we quickly adapted our programming and expanded our services to meet the growing needs we were seeing around us in Ukraine. So for 2 years, we as a HealthRight International and its local entity, Ukrainian Foundation for Public Health, provided over 4.3 million services to around 910,000 clients. Next, please. So our key insights from providing psychological support to women and girls in humanitarian settings are as follows. War-affected people have multi-sectoral needs. Those holistic and integrated care should be offered. In our project, services are provided by multidisciplinary teams staffed with social worker, adult and child psychologists, lawyers, and health workers. We offer comprehensive services, psychological counseling, case management, GBV protection, HIV prevention, sexual and reproductive health services, economic empowerment initiatives. Within one of our projects implemented in eastern and southern Ukraine in partnership with FHI 360 and with financial support from USAID and BHA, we are integrating gender-based violence care and mental health psychosocial services into the primary healthcare facilities. Another key component of this project is capacity building activities for doctors, general practitioners, and nurses. We train them in WHO interventions like clinical management of rape, MHGAP, problem management plus, self-help plus, and also first psychological aid. Next, please. Another insight, mobility and accessibility of services are critical. We identify those in need and bring service to them. In March 2022, just several weeks after the full-scale invasion, we established 50 crisis mobile teams in 11 regions of Ukraine in partnership with UNICEF and the Ministry of Social Policy. By September 2023, more than 70 mobile teams operated in 21 regions of Ukraine. The teams assisted people on the move, in shelters and ADP camps. They provided counseling on evacuation trains, in railway stations and bomb shelters, and nearby building hit in missile attacks. Also, they navigated the integration of displaced families into host communities. Next, please. Economic empowerment initiatives are essential to build women's resilience and well-being. So last week, just almost 500 clients of HealthRight day centers and halfway houses which operate in Kyiv, Lviv, and Uzhhorod received certificates or diplomas for the successful completion of professional courses. This initiative was implemented with support from the Embassy of France in Ukraine. The women, mainly internally displaced, domestic violence survivors, and those in difficult life circumstances mastered new professions like barista, SMM manager, and lash designer to have a fresh start in life and also financial independence. And last slide, please. I would like to finish my presentation on a positive note and with the most important insight: the vital role of civil society organizations, women-led organizations, and community-based organizations during the humanitarian crisis in Ukraine should be recognized and supported. They provided services to be quicker, they are more flexible, better equipped, and more efficient at closing gaps and addressing urgent needs, particularly in the first months of the war or some disaster. That is why their local knowledge and networks should be extensively used in the post-war recovery of Ukraine. Thank you for your attention, and if you have any further questions about our work in humanitarian setting, please ask them during our questions and answers session. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Halina. Now we welcome Halina Zhukovska.
Thank you very much. Доброго дня. Мої щирі вітання та подяка організаторам сьогоднішнього заходу за можливість ще раз привернути увагу всієї міжнародної спільноти до проблем, з якими стикається Україна та весь наш народ на шляху до своєї ідентичності та незалежності.
Dear participants and organizers of the event, I sincerely appreciate the opportunity to raise awareness in the international community about the challenges Ukraine and Ukrainians face in their fight for identity and independence.
Дякую колегам та колежанкам з Міжнародного благодійного фонду Українська фундація громадського здоров'я за постійну увагу до проблем прав українських жінок як в Україні, так і за її кордоном.
I thank my partners from HealthRight International and the Ukrainian Foundation for Public Health for their consistent efforts to protect the rights of vulnerable populations in Ukraine and other countries.
10 років російської окупації та війни в Україні змусили мільйони людей залишити свої домівки. Пані Галина сказала про той дуже ту велику кількість людей, які змушені були покинути як Україну, так і змушені були бути переміщеними в межах України.
As a result of 10 years of Russian invasion and military offensive, millions of people fled their homes. Halina Skipalska already mentioned the huge numbers of those who had to flee their homes and displaced within Ukraine and became refugees in other countries.
Збройна агресія триває, і це призводить до збільшення кількості жертв, руйнувань і переміщення українців як всередині України, так і за її межами.
The ongoing conflict continues to take lives and cause devastation and mass migration within the country and to other countries.
У подоланні наслідків війни маю відмітити підтримку системи організації ООН, особливо ту діяльність, яку здійснює спеціальна представниця Генерального секретаря ООН з питань сексуального насильства в умовах конфлікту пані Праміла Патен у питаннях протидії сексуальному насильству, пов'язаного з війною, та протидії всім видам насильства як складової такої діяльності.
Today, I would like to highlight the support and express gratitude for this support from UN agencies, especially the United Nations Special Representative on Sexual Violence in Conflict, Pramila Patten. They provide a lot of assistance with the cases of conflict-related sexual violence and other types of violence.
Завдяки нашій спільній тісній співпраці уряд України з 2022 року має спільну рамкову програму співпраці між урядом України та системою організації ООН в питаннях протидії сексуальному насильству в умовах конфлікту і імплементаційний план на реалізацію цієї рамкової програми. Важливу роль в виконанні імплементаційного плану відіграє міжвідомча робоча група з питань протидії сексуальному насильству, пов'язаному із збройною агресією Росії проти України та допомоги постраждалим особам.
Thanks to this cooperation and support, we have the framework program between Ukraine and the UN on conflict-related sexual violence prevention and response. We elaborated implementation plan and established an interagency working group which is in charge of the implementation of this plan.
До складу міжвідомчої робочої групи входить більше ніж 130 представників з 55 організацій. І за минулий рік нам вдалося досягти значних успіхів у реалізації імплементаційного плану.
Over 130 representatives from 55 organizations contribute to the work of this interagency working group. And over the past year, we have achieved significant success in the implementation of this plan.
Хочу дуже коротко зупинитися на тих досягненнях, які в нас є в нашій діяльності. Всупереч війні Україна продовжує виконувати свої міжнародні зобов'язання і вимоги національного законодавства у сфері забезпечення рівних прав і можливостей жінок і чоловіків, прав свобод людини.
I would like to tell very briefly about our achievements and challenges of our work. Despite the war, Ukraine continues to fulfill its international obligations and legal requirements in the field of ensuring human rights and freedoms and gender equality.
Одним з таких досягнень є впровадження дорожньої карти імплементації Конвенції Ради Європи про запобігання насильству щодо жінок і домашньому насильству та боротьбу з цими явищами. Маю відмітити, що Стамбульська конвенція була ратифікована України у 2022 році, у перший рік повномасштабного вторгнення Росії на територію України.
Among the achievements is the implementation of the roadmap for the Istanbul Convention. It should be mentioned that convention was ratified by Ukraine in 2022, in the first year of Russia's full-scale invasion.
Із практичних кроків реалізації конвенції варто зазначити, що ми наразі зараз працюємо над приведенням чинного законодавства України у відповідність до положень Стамбульської конвенції.
And now it should be noted that now we are working on bringing the Ukrainian legislation into line with the Istanbul Convention.
Важливим аспектом практичної діяльності є робота з категоріями осіб, які потребують особливого втручання з боку держави та міжнародних партнерів, представників громадянського суспільства.
Another important focus of our work is support for vulnerable populations that require assistance from the government, humanitarian organizations, and NGOs.
Безумовно, такою категорією є внутрішньо переміщені особи.
Without any doubt, internally displaced persons are those who need a lot of help during the war.
За попередніми даними дослідження, яке наразі зараз проводиться в Україні ООН «Жінки» спільно з громадською організацією Український центр соціальних реформ на замовлення Офісу віце-прем'єр-міністерки з питань європейської та євроатлантичної інтеграції і урядової уповноваженої з питань гендерної політики за фінансової підтримки уряду Швеції. Станом на початок березня 2024 року, за офіційними даними, на території України зареєстровано практично 5 мільйонів внутрішньо переміщених осіб, 60% з яких є жінки.
According to the research conducted by UN Women, Ukrainian government agencies, and with the financial support from Sweden government, as of March 2024, about 5 million IDPs were registered in Ukraine. Almost 60% of them are women.
Як показало дослідження, однією з основних проблем, з якими стикаються жінки з числа внутрішньо переміщених осіб, є фінансова проблема.
As the research reveals, livelihood is one of the main problems faced by IDP women.
Близько 50% відчувають потребу у фінансах.
About 50% report they cannot meet their basic needs.
Високим є потреби жінок в доступі до житла, що розширює загальні витрати родин на оренду та викликає необхідність отримання більшого заробітку для жінок.
More households are headed by women, and many families have to rent accommodations now. Thus, women have to earn more to provide for themselves and their families.
Повномасштабне вторгнення масштабувало актуальне до того питання економічного стану та захисту жінок, чиї чоловіки боронять Україну, загинули або стали недієздатними внаслідок війни. Загальна чисельність жінок з цієї категорії з кожним роком зростає.
The full-scale invasion has worsened the financial stability and protection of the women whose husbands are fighting, were killed or injured in the war, or are in captivity now, and the number of such women is growing every year.
Більшість жінок цієї категорії зіштовхуються не лише з психологічними проблемами адаптації та розуміння поточного стану, а і з економічними, пов'язаними з роллю жінки в родині, зменшенням достатку родини, необхідністю витрати додаткових ресурсів на лікування, догляд за хворими членами родини.
Most of these women face not only mental health issues and necessity to take new roles, including play bigger role in generating income. They also have to spend money for husband's medical treatment and rehabilitation.
Тому посилення економічної спроможності жінок – один із напрямів нашої роботи і пріоритетів діяльності уряду. За кожним другим малим бізнесом, відкритим у 2023 році, стоїть жінка.
That is why women's economic empowerment is among our priorities today. It should be mentioned that every second small business started in 2023 is run by a woman.
Родини ветеранів війни. За даними Міністерства у справах ветеранів в Україні нараховується 68 085 осіб, що отримали інвалідність другої або першої групи унаслідок війни. І більшість цих осіб є чоловіками. Подальше забезпечення та утримання таких осіб перекладається на жінок.
Veteran families. According to the Ministry of Veteran Affairs in Ukraine, there are over 68,000 people who became disabled as a result of the war. Most of these people are men, and they are dependent now on their wives or mothers. That significantly and negatively affects their family budgets.
Особливої уваги та спільної координації та взаємодії державних органів, місцевого самоврядування, міжнародних та громадських організацій, партнерів з розвитку потребують постраждалі від воєнних злочинів, зокрема від сексуального насильства в умовах конфлікту.
Another important challenge is to create compensation and reparation systems and support survivors of war crimes and conflict-related sexual violence. This requires coordination of efforts of governmental agencies, international and civil society organizations, and partners.
Для реагування на ці виклики за ініціативи віце-прем'єр-міністерки з питань європейської та євроатлантичної інтеграції, починаючи з 2022 року, створено 11 центрів допомоги врятованим.
To address war challenges, 11 centers were established on the initiative of the Deputy Prime Minister for European and Euro-Atlantic integration to support war-affected people.
В цих центрах внутрішньо переміщені особи та місцеві мешканці можуть отримати соціально-психологічну допомогу, юридичні консультації та інформаційну підтримку з різних питань.
In these centers, internally displaced persons and local people can receive psychosocial support, legal consultations and information on various topics.
Одним із серйозних викликів під час воєнного стану є зниження рівня безпеки жінок, дітей, людей похилого віку та збільшення кількості випадків домашнього насильства.
Another serious challenge is the increase of security risks for women, children, and the elderly, in particular cases of domestic violence.
За 11 місяців 2023 року кількість звернень з приводу домашнього насильства збільшилася на 20% попередньо, порівняно з аналогічним періодом 2022 року.
In 2023, the number of domestic violence cases increased by 20% compared to the same period of 2022.
В цих умовах нагальною потребою є необхідність розробки нових протоколів реагування, проведення спеціального навчання, створення суміжних програм по роботі з кривдниками, покращення міжвідомчих взаємодій у проведенні таких програм.
Taking on this into account, we need to develop new response protocols, conduct specialized training, create new programs for working with offenders, and improve interagency coordination.
За час повномасштабного вторгнення у зв'язку з тимчасовою окупацією територій, активними бойовими діями на території громад та масовими обстрілами 10% спеціалізованих служб підтримки постраждалих припинили свою роботу, і це є великою загрозою для надання відповідних послуг.
During the full-scale invasion, as part of the territory of Ukraine is occupied or due to active military operations and mass shelling, 10% of the specialized support services for violence survivors ceased their operations.
Для вирішення цих питань Міністерством соціальної політики спрямована діяльність на поєднання національної системи реагування на домашнє та гендерно зумовлене насильство з діяльністю міжнародних та громадських організацій, і ми дуже розраховуємо на таке сприяння і поєднання.
To address these challenges, the Ministry of Social Policy of Ukraine consolidates its efforts to respond to domestic and gender-based violence with international and public organization, and we actually very count on this support.
Така діяльність можлива через посилення діяльності мобільних бригад соціально-психологічної допомоги на деокупованих територіях, де зруйнована соціальна інфраструктура, посилення спроможності фахівців, які працюють у цій сфері, впровадження програм психологічного супроводу постраждалих осіб, розробка навчальних програм підготовки фахівців, які працюють з різними категоріями осіб.
They can support us through the strengthening of the work of mobile teams in the occupied territories where the social infrastructure has been destroyed, building the capacity of specialists working with the violence survivors, implementation of psychosocial support programs for survivors, development of new educational programs for specialists who work with various vulnerable populations.
Дотримання прав громадян, так само як і перемога України, неможлива без міжнародної підтримки та всебічної співпраці урядів та громадянського суспільства. Ми дуже розраховуємо на таку спільну роботу. Дякую за увагу.
It should be highlighted that protection of human rights as well as the victory of Ukraine is impossible without international support and extensive cooperation between the government and civil society. And we really appreciate this support. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Helena. Thank you for sharing that insightful presentation. We'll now welcome Katerina to share some reflections.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much, dear colleagues. Thank you for the opportunity to be able to contribute to the discussion. What I would also want to mention is that as you mentioned in the very beginning, so Lastrada actually works in Ukraine for a pretty long time. Yeah, so more than 25 years. And what we observed during all that time, that such issues as gender-based violence in general and domestic violence, violence against women, human trafficking, they remain to be actual, and they remain to be in the spot of the day during different processes, whether it's a peaceful time, whether it's a COVID crisis, whether it's a full-scale invasion. It's always the situation when, from the one hand, it's actual, at the other hand, very often, such issues as women's rights, protection of women, violence against women, often might be not prioritized comparing to other, other issues, troubles, questions that are also very important in the country. But what we do observe, as I said, that these questions remain to be actual. And of course, in the situation of the full-scale invasion, it's definitely become even more challenging to address. What we observed in the practice of the work of La Strada, Ukraine and La Strada, is operating and coordinating the work of the National Toll-Free Hotline on Prevention Domestic Violence, Human Trafficking and Gender Discrimination, a National Toll-Free Hotline for Children and Youth. We do receive and we do see a number of calls specifically from women, and specifically that reflect the situation when there is a clear effect of the full-scale invasion. What we observe within this context that with the beginning of the full-scale invasion, the questions or the situation of the domestic violence, the situation of violence against women, whether it's sexual violence or sexual harassment, became less prioritized, or I would rather say, kind of the minimized even by the survivor themselves, because very often they compared it to the context of the war, to the situation of the war, and we had the situation when those who called to the hotline were saying that, I'm really sorry that I'm bother you in such a situation. There is a war, people are dying, there are bombing, there are so many tragedies, and I'm sorry, but I mean, the violence is still there. The issue is that it's became more challenging, more difficult to address. It's become more difficult to identify. We all know that in the active phase of the full-scale invasion during the first years, there were extremely limited possibilities to survivors of domestic violence, gender-based violence, to ask for help, to get the support, to be able to reach out any kind of the service, any kind of the institutions, again, because of the situation. And that's sometimes also where the challenge in when, for example, some of the survivors were still able to reach out for assistance, but they were, the response was, I mean, deal yourself. I will sort out your family business yourself, because I mean there is a war in the country, so we are not able. So definitely this is the process of addressing the challenge. At the same time, as I mentioned, the actuality is there, and for the year 2023, for the last year, we had almost 40,000 calls to the hotline, and more than 90% of them regarding the domestic violence issues, and more than, out of that number, more than 70% are the calls from women. So definitely the effect on women and girls is really great. It's really big, the effect of the war. And of course, in the situation of the war, there are other issues that becoming or making more vulnerable, more challenging. The situation of the full-scale invasion also, Pani Halina already mentioned, such issues as the conflict-related sexual violence also became a kind of new add-in. At the same time, it's not really new, because as far as the war continues for more than 10 years, it's from 2014, and we did receive, of course, the calls or the cases of the conflict-related sexual violence, specifically from women. But of course, in the light of the full-scale invasion, the scale became really very big, and of course it did require the response. It did require the providing services. And here also would like to mention that there are kind of the two or both sides of the effect. At the one hand, of course, we all in Ukraine faced the challenges with accessing the services, because due to very objective reason that the part of the territory is still under occupation of the Russian aggressions. Some of the territories and of course infrastructure was completely destroyed, like literally erased to the ground. And of course, the limitation of services, limitation of the response are completely clear and completely objective. The impact and the overload of the existing and available infrastructure is also there, because I mean definitely they were not foreseen or expected to receive so many people, because we all know that a lot of internally displaced women, and this is specifically women and women with children, moved to the more western part of Ukraine. if not left the country. And of course, the infrastructure, the services there were not kind of in a very good capacity to proceed with this. But at the same time, as a response to these challenges and as a response to the needs identified, there are a number of initiatives on creating, and my colleagues already, Pani Halina Skipalska and Pani Halina Zhukovska already mentioned it. There are a number of initiatives, a number of services that were created as a result of the response to the war challenges. And it's also very important that in the work with national documents, in the work with procedures, in the work of organizing the services or institution, it is clear vision and clear intention, and it's kind of becoming really an integral part that it is the process when war effect, the consequences, the specific should be taken into account when developing the documents, or reviewing the documents, updating the procedures, because these are current challenges. And this is another important thing I would want to mention. It's an important, it is really important in the situation of the war, in the situation of the crisis, in the situation of really challenging times, in whatever context it is very important to monitor and to analyze the, the tendencies, the changes in the needs, the changes in the gaps, because I believe my colleagues would also confirm it, that what we could have as a primary needs at the very beginning, let's say at the first weeks and at the first month of the full-scale invasion, and what are the needs or what are the challenges now after 2 years of the full-scale invasion can be different. And this is like this should be really the constant process of the monitoring, of the analyzing, collecting the data, collecting the information, not only the figures, even the figures are really important, but also the content analysis. And it's also very important coming to the interaction and collaboration and partnership with the different institutions. It's really important to ensure that there is an exchange of the information and exchange of the data, including the context data between different partners and between different structures, because we all know that gender-based violence, the violence against women, conflict-related sexual violence, domestic violence are really complicated issues and really complicated problems. And of course, they require the comprehensive response. So definitely, it's not only like the informing, it's not only the, the prosecution, it really should be a combination. And of course, it's clear that the one institution or the only institution, or whether it's governmental organization or institution or non-governmental organization or international organization, would not be in a position to, to cover everything effectively. Therefore, also one of the kind of the lessons learned and one of the findings, even if it's not something new, but it's like a really proof of what is really effective, the cooperation and collaboration between different structures and exchange. And again, the colleagues already mentioned the intergovernmental, intergovernmental thematic groups, where actually different actors are involved, both from the governmental institution and non-governmental institution. This is the coordinating meeting. This is the collaboration in providing and creating the services. What I also, another point I would like to mention, I understand that we are kind of probably the short of the time, but still I think it's also very important to mention. It's like a similar important to have the cooperation with various institutions and collaboration with various institutions as within the country, like specifically we're speaking about Ukraine, between the Ukrainian organization, but also with the organizations from other countries who also provide the assistance and who also provide the support specifically in the situation of Ukraine to Ukrainian citizens. Again, first of all, women and women with the children who left the country. And again, being in the situation of extreme vulnerability due to the number, due to the number and numbers of reasons, they lost everything. They might not have a place to return. They, because again, because of the temporary occupation by Russia, or destroyed cities, or some other, I mean, really active battles at that area. And they do remain to be vulnerable and sometimes are cut off from all the social networks, from the contacts. And again, are suffering and exposed to the situation of exploitation, to the situation of violence, to the situation of human trafficking. And of course, in the collaboration with international institutions, with non-governmental organizations and in other countries, is really an important condition. We are able to strengthen the support. We are able to exchange with the information, because it's really important for from the side of Ukrainian organization to know and kind of try to inform and the women, the survivors, the client, the potential those who potentially might leave the country, about the procedures, risk, and some important country-specific information from these countries. At the same time, it is also very important that the connection with Ukraine remains, because for the survivors, or those who were women and in need of any kind of assistance, because we also can provide with a kind of the context information. Another my point would be that kind of the recommendation to everybody, specifically the recommendation to the states, institutions, that it's really very important to partner, to support the initiatives and the work of the organizations, national organization, local organization in particular, who are specializing in this area, and because they would be the source. They would be the source of the, you know, of the knowledge, of the information, and the specific context of that. So thank you very much. If there are any further questions, I would be glad to answer.
Thank you so much, Katarina and Halina, for your presentations. Thank you to all of our speakers for your rich presentations and sharing your various perspectives on how best to support women and girls during and post-conflict. Both Halina and Katarina already jumped into our panel discussion questions around partnership. And so I'd love to invite all of our speakers back to the forum on the main stage here to answer this more general question around what types of partnerships are essential for building a comprehensive gender response in humanitarian settings. We just heard from Katarina a number of different ways to engage different actors, as well as Halina in making sure there's a diverse number of government, INGOs, and CSOs that are working in concert. But I'd love to hear from some of our other panelists about their reflections on what may be the most important partnerships, and not just the actors, but how best to do so. So maybe perhaps we could start with some of our Ugandan colleagues with any thoughts. Scott?
Yeah, so I think some of our experience here in Uganda and in the region here has indicated that part of building comprehensive programming, one is using kind of local knowledge and local structures. They understand how to navigate within the culture, and they understand, if you pick the right people, on how to realize the potential and how to change things or to improve things. But you need that kind of local knowledge to be able to navigate the area. But I think also we have found that it's also important that you have professional organizations or different technical skilled organizations that are brought in as well to address particular needs that people might have that are not available within the area, like the medical treatments, different skill sets of medical providers or psychotherapists or clinicians to provide regular proper treatment or services to people, but that are very skilled in technical service provision or professionals in the field, and are able to bring some of those resources, because in many cases, we're dealing with conflict environments. And so whatever resources had existed prior have either left the scene or are depreciated or not readily available or inaccessible. And so I think you need to want to kind of revitalize local resources and local knowledge and talent. But sometimes you may need to bring in other actors and organizations to address the kind of particular needs that different communities might have about medical treatment or counseling programs or other things like that, to treat people and to address some of their needs. So you have to kind of merge and kind of coordinate kind of the two aspects there.
Thanks, Scott. Perhaps Samuel, would you like to add and complement?
Yeah, thank you very much, Scott, for that. And I think just to add a little is definitely working with government is very essential for sustainability and ensuring that some of the policy frameworks that could be missing or requiring strengthening, especially policies that look into empowering women and girls are put in place. So I think that is a very good initiative. And here in Uganda, there are a number of networks, associations for women, women empowerment movements. So working with some of such structures is very beneficial. And even from the community level, in Uganda, we have the local council system where women are represented. But in most cases, they are not supported enough to actually fully participate and share their ideas. So I think it is very important that some of those networks, some of that structures from the community to the district to the national level are very essential for working with and also for purposes of sustainability. I think for now, that's what I can share. Thank you.
Great. Thanks, Samuel. Any other reflections on this question of partnership, essential partnerships?
If possible, I would give one of the examples on the partnership.
Yes.
Yeah, thank you. I think that, I mean, as the example, what we observe, and again, this is as a need, so the partnership definitely should be built and extended and strengthened, not only on the national level, but on the local level, on the level of Ramada, in the context of Ukraine, like a smaller administrative units, because national level, it's one thing, and very often, at least as in Ukraine, a situation in Ukraine, there is an understanding, the political will is there, but the like a localization of these on the local level, Ramada level, can be a bit different. And also I would like to give as an example of partnership and initiatives led by the non-governmental organization, but in fact, combining the efforts and joining the efforts of various partners. This is the building and creating the coalitions, 1325 coalitions working in many, if I'm not mistaken now, it's 19 regions of Ukraine. This is the coalition that were created and formed, let's say, formed by the non-governmental organization on the local level, on the oblast level, and they are joining different partners, police, they're joining the border service, you know, all the law enforcement sectors, justice and security sector, security and defense sector. And one of the primary purpose of this is promoting the activities and initiatives on the on realization and on implementation of the National Action Plan 1325. That is one of the kind of the crucial documents at this moment, because I mean it's really response to the context of the time. It's not the very first initiative started with a full-scale invasion, so it's a process. And this example of building the coalition, gathering the institutions on the oblast level, but then going to more smaller localization on the level of Gromada, or from our perspective, and I also believe the colleagues would also add or support it, it's really one of the good practices that we could share and could recommend for implementation. Thank you.
Thank you. That's such a great recommendation, and I appreciate these reflections. It also brings to mind the amount of time that needs to be put in to build these essential coalitions, these type of partnerships. And I'm wondering if any of the speakers have thoughts about prioritizing that time or the time it takes to move more quickly. Obviously, in more active hostilities, there's an urgency behind it. But with competing priorities, what are the difficulties? Would that be considered one of the challenges to building an inclusive social protection system during crisis? Or are there other challenges from your perspective that really make building an inclusive protection system difficult? And that's to everyone.
Якщо ви дозволите, то я готова сказати про те, як, власно кажучи, зараз уряд організовує роботу по наданню допомоги постраждалим від сексуального насильства в умовах конфлікту.
I would like to say several words about how the government is organizing services for violence survivors.
Як я вже говорила, що в 2022 році було підписано рамкову програму між урядом України і системою організації ООН, якраз спрямовану на вирішення цього питання.
As I already mentioned, in 2022, Ukraine signed a framework program with UN how to respond to violence cases.
Міжвідомча робоча група, яка якраз має питання реалізації цієї програми, складається з 5 підгруп.
The interagency working group consists of 5 subgroups.
Перша група – це надання допомоги постраждалим від торгівлі людьми, зокрема від тих осіб, які зазнають сексуального насильства.
The first subgroup provides services to those who survived human trafficking, including sexual exploitation.
Друга підгрупа – це підгрупа, яка надає допомогу постраждалим від сексуального насильства в умовах конфлікту.
The second group provides services and support those who survived conflict-related sexual violence.
Третя група займається удосконаленням законодавства в сфері протидії сексуальному насильству в умовах конфлікту.
The third group is in charge of improving legislation to the international standards.
Посилення спроможності сектору безпеки і оборони – це питання четвертої підгрупи.
The fourth subgroup is working to build capacity of our defense sector.
І нарешті надання репарацій і допомоги постраждалим – це питання п'ятої підгрупи.
The last subgroup is responsible for reparation and support to violence survivors.
Якщо говорити в цілому, то наразі зараз є розроблено 2 законопроекти, які унормовують питання надання допомоги постраждалим від сексуального насильства в умовах конфлікту.
So far, we elaborated 2 draft law to support violence survivors during the war.
Але разом з тим всі абсолютно служби, які є в Україні, соціального спрямування, міжнародні громадські організації вже сьогодні надають допомогу постраждалим від сексуального насильства, в тому числі центри допомоги врятованим, про які я вже говорила.
but it should be highlighted that already all social services, even without adoption of this law, they provide support to violence, to survivors of sexual conflict-related sexual violence.
І починаючи з березня цього року почав діяти проєкт, який надає проміжні репарації постраждалим від сексуального насильства в умовах конфлікту.
And also, since March of this year, we provide some reparations to violence survivors, although there is no existing legislation.
Цей проєкт працює під парасолею віце-прем'єр-міністерки з питань європейської та євроатлантичної інтеграції за фінансової підтримки глобального фонду Деніса Муквеге.
This initiative is coordinated by the Deputy Vice Minister for European and Euro-Atlantic Cooperation, and with financial support from Denis Mukwege Foundation.
І цей проєкт розраховано на 2024 рік, і в рамках проєкту допомогу отримують проміжні репарації, отримують 500 осіб. Дякую.
We are going to implement this project this year, and within this project, about 500 people will receive financial support. We can say reparation as survivors of conflict-related sexual violence. Thank you.
Thank you, Helena. Throughout this discussion, it's really heartening to hear about the reparations in both countries to survivors, and to see how together we can move forward to give access to justice. At this time, I just wanted to pause and ask Shanice, one of my colleagues, if there are any questions from our audience. Shanice?
Hi, everyone. We have one question to start with. It's specific for our Ukraine team. So how has the methodology of psychological counseling provided during wartime changed from the approach provided to clients prior to the war? And if it has changed, in what ways? How has it changed?
Maybe I will start from answering this question. So actually, I would say that after full-scale invasion, we started paying more attention to the psychological counseling, psychological support, and also supervisions for our staff, and how to take care, how to teach our staff to take care for themselves. So probably those participants heard about First Lady Initiative, How Are You? And also it's joined with WHO and many other partners, focused actually on mental health issues, mental health status of all Ukrainians. So mental health issue, the attention was drawn to it during COVID-19 and after, particularly during COVID-19 time. But now with full-scale invasion, we understand that we have to use some new approaches. So my answer is we started paying more attention to this issue. We also identified new proven interventions provided by WHO, by some other international organizations. I know that international society actively pilots some new interventions. So we train staff, and not only psychologists, but also social workers, general practitioners, how to screen, how to identify, and how to refer clients effectively. So it changed. We have more chances to train our staff, to be trained as a professionals, and also we have better access to different international initiatives, interventions, psychological interventions, in order to use them later and provide in provisions of services for our clients. So, and again, I would like to emphasize the important issue which we observe now: provision of supervision sessions, supervisory support for our staff, and also provision of some psychological support for staff on daily basis. So, for example, in HealthRight International, we have a list of different options. So, for example, if it happened with our staff, they also live in very unsafe conditions. They observe everyday missiles and attacks. So if it's a critical need of somebody to receive psychological services, then we have clinicians who can provide these services on some frequency. We also provide some support groups, different other outwork activities which can help our specialists to cope with their psychological issues. But I mentioned in my presentation, of course, SH Plus, Problem Management Plus are one of the best interventions which which are implemented by our staff in Ukraine, and also image gap for health providers.
Thanks, Halina. Any other thoughts, Katerina, that perhaps you'd want to add there in terms of response?
Maybe, yeah, maybe just to echo what Halina just mentioned, that definitely the attention to the psychological assistance and counsel really increased with a full-scale invasion. What we did observe that sometimes we can see that it can be less number of consultations, specifically on the psychological, but they are deeper, they are longer, because really the traumatization, the level of traumatization is really high. And it's, again, it's completely true that it's to those who are survivors themselves, who are witnessed, and who work with the survivors. And of course, it's really traumatizing to every single person in Ukraine living, or even to those who are already outside of Ukraine, because we are able, specifically to our organization, we are able to receive the calls via online messengers, via the online platforms, from those Ukrainians who left, who flee from the war and who are this country and other countries, but they still require the psychological support and assistance. And this is like a really, what we understand, that the consequences and the impact would be really long-term. So it's not only the emergency intervention, but really the system that should be built should be available and accessible to, for a longer period of time, to really wide range of groups.
Thank you. Thank you. And what I'm hearing from both country contexts is that mental health is a key issue that needs to be thought about when building social protection systems for survivors. So I'm wondering, in the broader scope, for each of you, if you have any thoughts or reflections on what an ideal social protection system looks like for women and girls, aside from mental health, which we just mentioned. In humanitarian settings, are there existing supports that we need to strengthen? And what are possible solutions to these key areas that we mentioned, the challenges around, for example, survivors not recognizing their own vulnerability because of the gravity of the situation around them, or even the shifting dynamics that happens with veterans who are experiencing disabilities, that shifting gender dynamics and putting women in the head of household seat. What types of solutions would best support women and girls given the current context? And that's open to anyone who would like to answer. Who would like to start?
Okay, I think if I can probably come in first and looking at, of course, how the protection systems can be strengthened. Of course, in Uganda, we have been receiving quite a lot of refugees coming in from South Sudan and the Democratic Republic of Congo, and currently lots of them arriving from Sudan following the insurgency that happened there. And as we know, these are human beings running away from war, and definitely they go through quite a lot of things. And women and children are about 83% of all refugees that we have in Uganda, about 1.6. So from the time they are received at the entry points, most of them arrive tired, arrive on foot, having walked hundreds of kilometers from wherever they're coming from. And when they arrive, definitely they need to find a very vigorous protection system that is available. And here currently in Uganda, we have been grappling with resources because the global situation really does not give way for quite a lot of resources. So we, as HealthRight, we try to make sure that from the point they are entering and at the reception centers, we have our community-based health workers who are available to provide psychosocial support, but also make sure that they help these people as they arrive to access services, the different services based on their different needs. And we have been working with the authorities, especially UNHCR and the Office of the Prime Minister, who are the chief coordinators of that response, to make sure that some of the protection gaps are highlighted or are actually worked upon. So we have formed the protection working group where most of these issues are discussed and the authorities are represented, who then take these issues and as they're advocating for resources, we ensure that some of the resources are actually directed to some of these gaps. Like in the transit centers, I know maybe, I don't know whether Ukraine have this kind of arrangement. These are like children centers where they come and play and use. Safeguarding issues are always very common, and we have also been working around those together with different partners, and of course using some of our psychosocial therapies like SH plus, PM plus, and of course CBT where appropriate, with some of the caregivers that are looking after these children. So it is a process, and I think for Uganda, we're operating on about 37% of the total funding that is required for the refugee response. So it can be very, very challenging, but we have really been making our effort to ensure that some of these protection gaps are strengthened. Yeah, thank you.
Thanks, Samuel.
If I
Go ahead,
could,
Scott, please.
yeah, if I could just add, I think in many cases, I think what needs to be done is to create something that's new or something that didn't exist before. I mean, we hear in many of the conflict settings, people want to go back to normal, or they want to go back to the way it was before. But I think, as Katerina indicated earlier, or alluded to earlier, that the condition beforehand and the systems beforehand were not ideal and were not suitable for many people anyway, and were suitable for people in the community either. So going back to the way things were before is not sufficient. So perhaps we could take some inspiration, I think, from Naomi Klein, who wrote a book, the Shock Doctrine, where she talked about not letting a crisis go to waste, and using that circumstance or those kind of altered conditions to create something new, and to use that opportunity to make something different and to make something better. During the conflict or during the crisis, we see typical roles, social kind of social norms have changed during the conflict. Women are doing things that they weren't allowed to do before in the community, or taking a more prominent role in government and military and business and other kinds of NGOs and UN agencies. And so they're playing a much more prominent role in managing things, directing things, providing services. And so I think it might be possible under kind of the changed circumstances to take advantage of the situation, to forge a different system and to forge a different reality moving forward, and to kind of move the benchmark, the goalposts, to a different place. And then once the conflict recedes or something, then you have kind of an altered playing field on which to organize things. So I think it's important maybe to take advantage of the changed circumstances. There's an opening there to kind of create something for different people to come to the fore as leaders in business and government, and community organizers. And I think that's important to kind of, as Naomi Klein says, don't let a crisis go to waste.
It's a great framework to move from, especially recognizing the opportunities that lie before, and the willingness of different partners to come forward. The last question that I just want to ask the group is around social accountability. Within the humanitarian space, there's been an increasing emphasis on survivor and community-led responses to crises. And I'm wondering what inclusivity looks like in humanitarian settings from your perspective. How do local organizations and institutions respond to women and girls' specific requests during crisis, before and after? Do you have any recommendations or thoughts of how to do this better, given the history of humanitarian efforts often being more of international assistance coming in and aiding? Maybe we can start with Halina.
Yes, thank you, Teresa. I will start. So we try to every month we look at what was done in previous months and tries to learn and to do something better. And particularly when we speak about inclusion and also even quality of services. So there are a lot of talks now around localization. So, and it's considered as a recipe and actually everybody knows that most of services are provided by local women-led organizations, voluntary groups, again, led by women. So those who live in these communities, they better understand what are the needs of a population. So, we hope that through localization processes, which we observe, there are not only discussions, but they started in Ukraine. We can better address needs of most vulnerable and to better work on inclusion issues. Because when we are in this community, we understand that here should be added this or this specific service for this population. So, for example, the most of, if we look at Ukraine map, most of HIV prevention services many years were focused on East and South, and attention of donors were a little paid to west of Ukraine. But when massive displacement happened, most of those who are at risk of HIV on substitution therapy, who needs receiving IRC therapy, they moved to west of Ukraine. And in the west of Ukraine, we immediately observed that even general practitioners or doctors at maternity hospitals, they have not enough knowledge how to treat, how to help women who are at high risk of HIV. So this is why it seems to me it was August, like 5 months after full-scale invasion, when we started a new initiative focused on those who are at risk of HIV, and moved from east to west of Ukraine and need access to essential for them health, social, psychological, and other services, and also they need services for their children. So I think that localization can be this recipe, and inclusion of civil society, women-led organizations into provision of these services, and also different coordination mechanisms on national level, regional level, and community level.
Thanks,
Okay,
Helena. Go ahead, Sam.
Maybe if I can come in also, thanks, Helena, for that very good submission. I think the other area is basically looking at the feedback and response mechanism, which is very essential in gaining a lot of understanding of really what the beneficiaries, especially women and girls, would want our programs to look like. So, like here in Uganda, what we have been doing has been really to make sure that we reach as many beneficiaries as possible, because that's the only way we can hear from them, and that is how we can incorporate the ideas into the interventions that we do. So I think that really strengthening feedback and response mechanism is a very strong area that really helps us to become accountable. And I think also using the community-centered tools as we do our work also brings in as many people as possible, and their participation in the intervention is really, and I think Helena already spoke about working with women-led organizations. We have quite a number of them here, and we have really been pursuing opportunities that can help us work with as many women-led organizations as possible. Thank you.
Go ahead, please, Katerina.
Yeah, maybe just to add to what colleagues said previously, like to contribute to that. That's really important, and also it is very important. Again, this is from the perspective and from practice of Ukraine. It's very important to, I don't know, to advocate, to make sure, to monitor, or to push sometimes and to press that this involvement and participation of the women's-led organization or specialized organization working with a concrete group were meaningful. So not the formal, like for, you know, for the just tick in the box, but really the meaningful and like a monitoring that the recommendations are used or like a followed or taken into consideration. The contribution is taken into consideration, because sometimes it's, I mean, unfortunately, but there can be the practice when technically or formally there like organizations who are working in the specific areas, women's organization, they are kind of involved in the, I don't know, councils or working group, but on practice, it's not that meaningful as they could be, and what is their knowledge and expertise and potential could be used.
Mm-hmm. Thanks, Katerina. And I think that also picks up on what you were sharing earlier about being able to monitor data and really go deeper and do that content analyses. So engaging the community as much as possible in that process. We're coming to a close. with our time, but I just wanted to check one last time with Shanice if there are any last questions, or the last question before we officially close for today. Shanice?
Yes, we do have one more question. Could any of the programs elaborate on how they're using new digital technologies in their work? And if so, how has this helped?
I can shortly say that, well, I'm not sure if it's with the concrete answer, but what we used in La Strada, so this was definitely they're starting to provide the consultations via the hotline in online format, and also including the possibility to call from abroad, what I've mentioned, because we mentioned via the Telegram, for example, and extending the platform where we use, where we provide consultations. So now it's a Telegram, it's an Instagram, it's, other things. And another also example, what was used, creating of the chatbot, survivor support bot, that bot for addressing the conflict-related sexual violence. It's both the possibility to inform the people about what conflict-related sexual violence is, because very often it's limited, as with the sexual violence, only to the rape. And if it was not a rape, it's considered nothing, but also it's referring to the hotline to get the consultation, and also referring to the online form that was developed in cooperation with the General Prosecutor Office for those who would like to report about the crime or what they experience or witnesses on conflict-related sexual violence, but would like to stay anonymous or have some concern. So it's possible to fill this form anonymously, and then the information will be transferred. But it's, again, for those people who have some concerns or thoughts for contacting the law enforcement bodies, but this is like a solution and option for them. So it's just one of the examples of the digitalization of some of the services that's provided. Thank you.
Can I also quickly answer this question? So in Ukraine, yes, we were trained on these issues during COVID-19 time. So most of psychologists, social workers, they have instructions and know how to provide services remotely. But after full-scale invasion, we in April 2022, we launched Safe Women Hub online platform as a Ukrainian Foundation for Public Health and HealthRight International for those women who flew from the war, who are in evacuation, who need first psychological support or long-term psychological counseling and support in case of gender-based domestic violence or sexual violence related to conflict. So, and we, during these 2 years, actually covered more than 20,000 women and girls and plus children who suffered different psychological, also social problems, who called to platform. And as Katerina said, so they also they prefer to anonymously to call and to receive these consultations, and often it's a big plus, and this is why we have so many clients who call, try to request our support through online platforms. We also run Support Me online platform for adolescents and their parents who face different psychological or mental health or even some issues related to adolescents' risky behavior, aggression, and violence. So, we still continue to provide services through Support Me platform, and particularly for women who need support. How to cope with some problems related to adolescents, like communication or even violence or bullying or etc. So there are a lot of examples of such platforms active in Ukraine. Yes, it's absolutely it's very important issue. I don't know, Teresa, if I can say about this, that we are thinking about some digital solution that can be used by specialists in the future based on SH+. So there are some discussions around this. not only by us as a HealthRight, but also among donors.
Thanks, Helena. Thanks, Katerina. It really is a great question about how best to leverage AI and digital technology as a whole. I think as reparations come forward, also just thinking about the mobile cash and how that's used for individuals as we use that for general cash assistance. We are now coming to a close, so I just want to thank you all for participating today. A big thank you to NGO CSW for allowing us to host this on their platform. A huge thanks to all of our panelists today. And thank you to our staff who made this event possible. We appreciate your presence today, and we hope that this dynamic and rich discussion has left you with a basic understanding of integrated approaches to building protection for women and girls, the importance of economic empowerment initiatives, the need to address women and girls' mental health in humanitarian settings, and also the value of inclusive participatory dialogue in crisis. Please note that a recording of today's session will be made available after the presentation, and we encourage you to visit our respective organizations' websites and social media to stay connected. Thank you again, and have a wonderful day or night, depending on where you are. And enjoy CSW68. Slava Ukraini.
Героям слава. Thank you.
Thank you,
Thank
everyone.
you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Scott. Thank you so much.
Oh,
It's a
you're welcome.
pleasure.
Thank you all.
Really well done. Thank you. Rich conversation. Thanks, Helena.
Thank you.
Thanks to the entire team. I think we had a good showing of HealthRight team members, so thanks, team.